Neil worked for the design firm Site Projects of New York before launching his independent career in 1987. He's been attending the Burning Man Festival in Nevada since 1999, creating large-scale portal sculptures, both on his own and in collaboration with other artists since 2004. He's currently focused on developing ecologically sustainable human habitations as well.
Hey, thank you so much. So glad to be here at Regeneration from 25 in Austin, Texas. And the title of this talk is The Sacred Regeneration of Gaia. The writing will be called RegenWorld in here. And it's going to be kind of a whirlwind. And as you heard, I'm really interested in the concept of future habitation of Earth. That's in sacred farming. And this is just one of my latest attempts with an AI image to model what I'm kind of picturing of three-dimensional cities that are living, growing organisms. Very much inspired by Paulo Solari. And what I'm going to do is to kick this off in a very concise way, is play this short intro video that's on my website so that you get like an overview of not just these future city concepts, but how and what I've been doing the last 20 years in this direction of working on these. My name is Harlan Emil Gruber. I have been creating interactive portal installations since 2004 at Burning Man and other festivals around the world, starting with the 1111 Diamond Portal. I've gone on to build many more of these portal installations that all contain the Quasar Wave Transducer, a device I invented that creates subtle low-frequency purring vibrations in the range of human brain waves and the Earth's Schumann resonance. These sounds also signify that the geometries used in these designs are vibrational energy patterns. The intention of these portal installations is to facilitate an evolution of consciousness in the participants so that they will awaken to the fact that everything in the world is sacred and choose to live accordingly. I have been doing presentations on the portal installations that go into detail explaining the three-dimensional geometries that are utilized in their design, as well as a general understanding of how three-dimensional geometry relates to the evolution of consciousness. The original inspiration for this work comes from one of my life's biggest influences, the geodesic dome inventor and comprehensive design scientist R. Buckminster Fuller. His vision is, quote, to make the world work for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological offense or the disadvantage of anyone. I'm also inspired by the Italian architect Paulo Solari's book, Arcology, City in the Image of Man, that depicts his visions of ecologically integrated three-dimensional megastructure cities. I have gone on to study how humanity can inhabit the Earth in the most beautiful and sustainable way, such as Bruno Taut's crystalline cities on mountaintops conceived in 1919, Glen Small's massive biomorphic biosphere from the late 60s, and contemporary bioarchitect Vincent Calabet's concepts such as this bridge built using 3D printing aerial drones. I have combined all of these studies into my own design for an arcology called the 12-Spiral City that consists of spiraling ramps wide enough to contain all of the buildings, streets, and gardens that are built upwards over time. I'm now developing a technique called TerrAquaforming, integrating land and water into human-built environments in a regenerative and life-enhancing way. Examples of this are the ancient rice terraces of Asia and man-made lakes, but TerrAquaforming goes a step further by integrating everything from the scientific to the spiritual nature of reality to create a world of divine harmony and sacred beauty to benefit not only humanity, but all life and the earth itself. I invite anyone inspired by this to collaborate on its development. The reason why I built the portals is to awaken this consciousness that I'm very much aligned with Buckminster Fuller, where I was introduced to his work when I was 20 years old, which is 1979, with this book, Synergetics. And synergy means the behavior of whole systems unpredicted by the behavior of their parts taken separately. And what I see happening here at RegenWorld is a very synergetic combination of all of our parts coming together to create something that is unprecedented. He coined the word synergy and synergetics, which synergetics is synergetic geometry embraces all the qualities of experience, all aspects of being. It involves geometric modeling, exploring interrelationships in the facts of experience and the process of thinking. Synergetics endeavors to identify and understand the methods that nature actually uses in coordinating the universe, both physically and metaphysically. It's really interesting that he's thinking not just physically, but the way we think about the universe.
And of course, this has been quoted so many times already yesterday, but they never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And that's what I'm working on, is creating this new model. And shortly after learning about this report, I walked into a gallery in New York City where I had just moved with this new wave rock band in 1981. I dropped out of college studying electrical engineering. I was interested in audio engineering. Couldn't deal with the engineering side. I just wanted to do the audio side. And I go into this gallery that's covered with these incredible scroll drawings by the Italian architect Paolo Solari called arcologies. It's a word he coined, which is architecture and ecology. And his vision is of these three-dimensional organic cities. Instead of two-dimensional suburban sprawl, cities will become three-dimensional. Remind you, I'm living in New York City, which is a very three-dimensional city, but it's not. The majority of land in New York City is given over to cars and streets, and all of those skyscrapers, you can't go into them unless you have a business or access to them. So there is really no three-dimensionality in that sense of a community and city. Here's another beautiful sketch of these arcologies, and here's a picture of how back in the early 60s when he was working on it with a model of one of these arcologies. And in the 60s, he gained a lot of notoriety and popularity of it, and he actually published a book in 1969 on MIT Press called Arcology, the City in the Image of Man. And on the cover, there's a cross-section through one of these megastructure cities, and throughout the book, half the book is these flow charts of him thinking how humanity and the universe operates. And the second half are these images of these giant cities, which if you see on the other side, there's a little Empire State Building, which was the tallest building at the time in the 60s, to show the scale. These buildings are over 1,000 feet high and maybe a mile or so across in one gigantic structure. But he never took it further than that. He just had these very abstract drawings of them, and he never really designed it how it would be built or what it would look like. It's just a concept. What he did start to do was, in Arizona, he give it 800 acres, and in 1870, started building Arcosaki. I'm not even showing the picture of that, but just to be noted that that still exists this day. It has a population of 40 to maybe 100 people at most over the years, and it's not really a thriving urban environment, but it is like an urban laboratory in Vista next to it. So with both of these inspirations, I went back to school, went to biomedical design, as you would nearby it. And while you're studying at art school, you get to learn art history. And this one image came up of this German expressionist architect, Bruno Taut, that was designing or have conceiving, not designing, these ideas for cities that were built as crystal cities on mountaintops. I'm very fortunate that back when I was studying, this book wasn't actually available and could only find a few images in art books of this alpine architecture. In 2004, it was reissued in completion, and so you can see a few more of these images, and a lot of them are black and white, crystal cities of mountaintops, and also like a city in a canyon. When you're seeing those arcs, that's a rainbow. It's not in color, so it's hard to tell, but the water is flowing directly through this city, and the mist is creating rainbows. And then this beautiful full color run of a crystal city on a mountaintop, that's with a quote in German, but to translate, engage the masses in a great chaos, which fulfills everybody, from the humblest to the foremost. Each sees in a great communality theory the work of his own hands. Each builds in true sex. And he had a lot of other concepts in this that were very spiritual. He saw humans as spiritual organs of the earth to build and unify the earth, not just for humans to inhabit, but for all life. Usually inspired by him. I love being able to share this because he's a little bit obscure. Also, I learned about Glen Small's Biomorphic Biosphere, which, although not as popular as Paolo Solari's ecology concept, he still, is well known, and he actually founded the Southern California Institute of Architects, which is a very prominent architecture school, but he was asked to leave many years ago because he was into these very abstract, unusual ideas, and they became a much more mainstream architecture school. He actually is a good friend of mine, lives in Joshua Tree, and I was able to interview him on this project for my YouTube channel, the Portals to New York YouTube channel. I highly recommend that video to learn more about his work. And he was just most recently featured in the Museum of Modern Art in New York City 2 years ago in the show called Emerging Ecologies, along with 30 other very visionary architects, of course, including Paolo Solari and Buckminster Fuller. So with these studies of these incredible three-dimensional ecological cities, we also came across, and it's very interesting how the 60s was such a vibrant time for these visions to come out. This is Andres Baltaing's urban spiral hierarchy, which is very influential in a project I've been developing. You'll see in a moment that is these spiraling ramps with all the buildings built on that. And also Walt Hilbert's, again, a spiraling structure. And what's very interesting about this concept is that you see it's in the ocean. And he has this idea that he could use electrolysis to build the structure out of the minerals in the ocean. So this whole building is being built with material that comes out of the ocean water. Starting, and of course you started that little spiral and it keeps growing and growing. You see it's under construction and this thing can keep growing bigger and bigger over time. And this is exactly the vision that I'm aligned with, that cities can be living organisms that can grow over time. Here is a contemporary architect, Mitchell Joachim, and he has this idea of retrofitting New York City. You see there's a wetland screen running down the middle, super easy, accessible public transportation. The buildings are all being farmed and there's aerial drones. And even further than that is this also contemporary architect, Vincent Callebaut. He's a Belgian architect practicing out of France, and he's not very wide known in the US, but in the rest of the world, he has a project he built in Taipei. He has projects he proposed for all over Asia and the Middle East, and of course in Europe. But this was a concept, once we bombed Mosul, Iraq, and destroyed all their bridges, he proposed that we rebuild the bridges with these flying aerial drones, but not just build it as a bridge, but make it into this living environment. You see water flowing through it, and even though each building block is just a very simple cubic arch structure, the whole thing becomes this amorphous mountain-like shape with the trees and the water all flowing through it. So it just shows that we could actually build these very natural environments, and it's not that complicated. It can be done. It's actually quite realistic. It can be done quickly and easily. So with that, I've combined all of these inspirations plus others that are in my book, and I interview other people on my YouTube channel, into a concept called the 12 Spiral City. It's a narcology idea, and it's largely inspired by the work of John Michel, who wrote this book, New View over Atlantis, that popularized a whole concept of ley lines and units of measurement, that how the feet, inch, and rod, and cubic, and inch times are really sacred harmonic units, but also that the whole Earth has these energy grid. He really is one of the main people that popularized in contemporary times this idea that ley lines, and you see this view on the book cover of like the churches and stone circles all being lined up. After he wrote that book in the mid-80s, he wrote another book called Dimensions of Paradise. And you see this very unusual diagram on the cover with these circles and stars. And here's another one trying to explain it. And it took this whole entire book to explain this diagram called the Heavenly City. And it looks just like a pretty geometry, but he really goes into detail about why this has a very significant underlying principles in its proportions and in its numbers. So with that, I'm thinking, well, that's a cool idea for a city, but it's just two-dimensional. So with the Andres Baltaing's urban spiral hierarchy, I thought, why not take this city plan and make it into these spiraling ramps? So I did a presentation in 2008 in San Francisco at the EcoCity World Summit, where I built this model and showed in the lower corner, you see a cross-section through the ramps. So let's say there's very precise numbers in this design. And the ramps themselves are 314 feet wide, which is like a city block. And there's an inner, outer, and central road. And then the buildings can be built up to human scale height of 45 feet. Just like when you walk around Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco or the West Village in New York City, that's pretty much the height of all those human scale buildings. It makes for a very human scale environment. But as you see, these buildings also have trees on their rooftops. And each ramp is 144 feet high. So that means 100 foot, 99 foot, there's a lot of nines in this numerology, but opening between the ramps for air and light to come through. And because there's 12 of them, in cities naturally segregate into neighborhoods. Like I lived in New York City for a long time, and I was in the East Village. But in the West Village had the gay neighborhood, just like in San Francisco is Castro neighborhood. And like the Upper East Side gets like families, and even businesses always segregate, especially historically, which is why Wall Street is such a focus of business. And New York City goes, the garment district and the flower district, and all these businesses will always congregate together. But also, like I say, people like to live with like people. So each of these 12 spirals would have a certain aspect to it. Like one may be the university spiral, and another might be like the theater district of New York City and the arts. So it naturally happened over time. You can see the scale of it. Each of the ramps are 2,160 feet in diameter, and the overall diameter of the entire city is about 2 miles. So I have it superimposed over downtown San Francisco just to get a sense of the scale of it. So this is a computer-generated image I had a friend make a few years ago, not using AI at all. And so it's very blocking, but it shows how the spirals would grow over time. So one spiral may be only 1 level high, another's 2, another's 3. You also see at the intersections of the spirals, these towers. Well, they wouldn't look like those slick glass towers. It would be much more, and even all the buildings on it would be much more organic, such as this AI-generated, extremely organic kind of building. But somewhere in this idea that we would be building very beautiful, very organic structures. Those towers, though, would be 12 stories high, which is the 144 feet between each level. And those would have all of the businesses, all the community spaces, and there would be elevators on these buildings for both, pedestrians, but also the vehicles that would be coasting down these spiral ramps. So that in each of these intersections, you'd be able to go up and like I said, the vehicles wouldn't be regular cars. You'd be like golf carts and other types of things. Of course, the one wheels people have, scooters, bicycles, rollerblades, but especially, golf cart style vehicles that can coast down and then be brought up to the upper levels to be able to go out to the outer circles. So and there would be a total over time, 12 spirals high. So that would make for a 1,728 foot tall structure, which by today's means isn't that high. And yet, it wouldn't happen all at once. And here's an interior view looking across. And of course, in the center section would be the real focus and center of the city that would have the parks and the venues, sports venues, music venues, all kinds of beautiful gardens in the middle, which isn't shown here. And like I say, the building would be each person gets their own spot. You can build a wide variety of anything you want on your part of the spiral. So it would be very diverse. And I'd like to start to model this in virtual reality so people can be experimenting with it. And here's just another image of a valley that has these domes and buildings built in. So this is more what the city would actually look like. And like I say, besides it just being built on a big flat open plain, the idea for this kind of city could be done into mountain canyons and terracing. And so then here we are at the bio image for this of an AI prompt. I was trying to get it to do the 12 spiral city and they couldn't follow that. So I said, just make an organic 3-dimensional city. So like I say, I see these cities possibly being completely living. Even the idea for how do you build a structure that goes up 1,700 feet, you need a lot of structural support. But in my vision, you could do just enough to get the first level and then start growing trees. And on each level, the trees would add the extra support that you need so that when the next level is built, the whole thing gets stronger and stronger. So this whole thing you built like that, or using types of building materials and technologies that are very light so that you don't need as much weight because, concrete and steel is heavy. So you have to engineer for that before using new ceramic materials that are stronger and lighter. You wouldn't have to have as much, kind of the way a human body works and the way our bones work in all kinds of living organisms. They're lightweight and yet strong. So that brings us to the end of my presentations. I'm so glad you're here, and I think we've got a few minutes for questions and answers.
You had an example where there's a spiral in the ocean called electrolysis.
Yeah.
Electrolysis?
It was a mineral accretion. The same way coral reefs. Coral animals make their coral reefs out of the minerals from the ocean. How does coral grow? So it's very much like coral. The vision is to work with light. Humans can interact with light. I actually believe that dolphins are largely responsible for the way that coral reefs and tropical fish look. They don't work with their hands like humans, but they're working with their mind. And there's ways to program DNA and ways to interact with nature on these higher, subtler levels to create reality. How did we get our human form? How did a rose bush or a hopper tree get designed? Is that just chance, random chance? There's some higher dimensional genetic background, and I see humans in building these new cities tapping into that understanding of how all life generates in the universe and start to then create cities along that. And that's Wolf Hilbergs who have that concept of the spiraling city that grows out of the ocean.
So it's radio frequencies that...
No, it would be radio. It's high. It's consciousness. It's conscious. It's higher dimensional consciousness that is how the universe came into being. How we're here in the first place, and have reality, have this three-dimensional reality to interact with. So, and the thing is, humans are waking up to their multi-dimensional, higher dimensional self. And so that's what we're tapping into. That's what we need to wake up to create this new Earth. Like the new Earth is not, like you said, electromagnetic frequencies. It's not like a machine. That's 3D. And all the people that are proposing working on that 3D mechanistic level, they're not going to get to this by the new Earth. The new Earth is programmed from the higher dimensions of tuning into the way our DNA works, the way light works. Come on, chime in. Anything else someone saw would like to elaborate on?
How do you want to be involved in initiatives to build some of this stuff?
Great question, because that is kind of like the focus. As much as I've been thinking about that 12 spiral city for 40 years now, and would like to maybe get behind that, be realized somewhere. I also did mention, it was in the intro video, the idea of TerrAquaforming, which is a much more basic principle that references Victor Schauberg, who is this mastermind of water and integrating water into the earth in conscious, sacred ways. But the number one thing that I'm working on right now is to get this book and get this presentation in front of all of the young architects and designers that are interested and to inspire them. Just like I was inspired when I picked up Paolo Solari's Synergetics and then saw, that was Buckminster Fuller's Synergetics and Paolo Solari's arcology drawings, and it's kind of set me on this path here 45 years later, that I'd like to stand up in front of other young people, present not only those two, but also all these other people that I think are very relevant, such as Bruno Taut and Wolf Hilbergs and my ideas, to inspire them, to be the instigator and inspiration for the masses so that we can have a synergetic way of doing it. It's not like I want to be the one that sits down and designs these cities and gets them built. And so, yeah, I'd love to be invited to universities and other events like this where I could present on this work. So thank you all so much. Really glad to be here today.